Hi, I'm Mike Elam, and this is BUFORD PUSSER, the other story.
It was February 1st, 1966. Sheriff Pusser and two deputies responded to the report of a theft at the Shamrock Motel at the state line. A purse belonging to Dorothy Vogel, a guest at the motel, had allegedly been stolen. She and her husband George had dined at the Shamrock restaurant the previous evening and suspected they had been drugged. When they awoke the next morning, Dorothy noticed that her purse was missing from their room. When Sheriff Pusser encountered Mrs. Hathcock, the owner of the motel and restaurant, in the motel office, he claimed that she was intoxicated and belligerent toward he and his deputies. He advised her that he had two search warrants, one for stolen property, the other for intoxicating liquors. He went on to say that at this point, Miss Hathcock asked him to step into her private living quarters as she was hoping to cut a deal that might keep her from being arrested. Now let's go back 2 years to the same motel and the same room. This is where Louise's husband, Jack, was also shot and killed. Jack and Louise had divorced in September of 1957, but they continued to operate the state line businesses together. That is, until Towhead saw an opportunity. Some, including the FBI, thought White wanted to use the Shamrock as a base of operation for his illegal activities. Towhead romanced Louise, who was 17 years his senior, and White moved right into the Shamrock. The problem was that Jack, not Louise, owned the Shamrock and the other state line properties. Carl Douglas Towhead White convinced Louise that they needed to eliminate Jack. So on May 22, 1964, Jack was shot and died of the wounds he received in room number 1. Louise claimed that Jack assaulted her and that she shot him in self-defense. The thing that most people don't know, however, is that Towhead was in the room when Jack Hathcock was shot. Bobby Anderson, the Hathcock's 14-year-old nephew, was in the room just seconds before Jack was fatally wounded, and he saw Towhead, something that would not be revealed to the public, even though official reports place young Anderson in the room. Sheriff Pusser, shown here in Hathcock's room after the shooting, would spin a tale to explain that he had to kill Hathcock to protect his own life, a story that the public would believe for the past several decades. But as we now know, Sheriff Pusser may have lied when he claimed he was forced to kill Miss Hathcock. When we examined the photos of the shot that Sheriff Pusser said Louise fired at him, we noticed it went through the window at approximately 44 to 48 inches above the floor level, with the projectile in an upward trajectory lodging itself in the awning post outside the room at approximately 7 feet above ground level. Two people inside the living area of the motel office said that they heard Sheriff Pusser's .41 Magnum fire multiple times before they heard the single report of Hathcock's smaller caliber .38 handgun. This begs the question, did Sheriff Pusser fire first, then kneel beside Hathcock's body, taking her gun and firing at an upward angle through the window, so that he could claim that she fired on him first. Also, when we look at Miss Hathcock's autopsy report, we see that the two shots Sheriff Pusser said that he fired first hit the posterior side of the body, exiting the anterior or front of the body. Sheriff Pusser's third shot was to her head as Louise lay on the floor. Coincidentally, Howard Carroll, one of the ear witnesses in the office area, said he heard Louise begging for her life before any shots were fired. This stand-in shows us the approximate view Sheriff Pusser would have had of Hathcock as he fired his first two shots. The red X's note the bullet entry points. Chief Deputy Jim Moffett, who was just outside Hathcock's room in the hallway as shots were fired, would go home that day and tell his wife and his adult son, "If anything ever happens to me, you need look no further than BUFORD PUSSER." If you'd like to see and hear more stories about Sheriff Pusser and the State Line Mob, be sure and hit that subscribe button. By now, everyone's probably curious about what actually happened to Louise Hathcock's money. Hathcock family members, including her niece, Barbara Anderson, would tell me that her Aunt Louise would keep large sums of money at the Shamrock. This isn't merely a matter of opinion, as this is evidenced by this excerpt from an FBI report where White once left Louise and stole $40,000 from her. That is the equivalent of $400,000 in today's economy. Anderson, as a young girl, would often stay with her Aunt Louise at the Shamrock. She would go on to tell me that she knew of 3 places where Louise hid money. One of the places that Anderson said that Louise would hide money was behind a hidden panel between an office closet and the wall in room number 1. Another such place was a hidden compartment between the kitchenette and the bathroom wall in Hathcock's private living quarters. A third location Anderson told me about was in a horse pasture, where Jack and Louise often buried money just in case search warrants were served on the Shamrock. Barbara and other Hathcock family members told me that Sheriff Pusser searched the Shamrock for Hathcock's money before the IRS could seize the State Line properties for non-payment of federal taxes. Pusser never found Louise's money. And where was Towhead White when Hathcock was killed? Towhead was serving a sentence in federal prison for moonshining and the robbery of Biloxi's Red Carpet Casino. Rumors have persisted for decades that Towhead and Louise were married at some point. FBI reports refer to their arrangement as a common law marriage. Regardless, there are documents which suggest they had some sort of relationship, as her last Social Security card had her last name listed as White, as did her driver's license. I also located correspondence where Hathcock had been corresponding with an attorney. If you notice here, the attorney addresses her as Mrs. Carl White. Hathcock's funeral would take place at the McPeters Funeral Home in Corinth, Mississippi. The night before her funeral, who would show up in handcuffs? Towhead White. This is something that just didn't ordinarily happen unless a couple was married. But were they? No one seems to know for sure, as no marriage license has ever been found. The Hathcock and Anderson families were shocked when he was accompanied into McPeter's sanctuary in handcuffs with a guard. Later that same night, Towhead was seen at the Shamrock having a party with friends. He was no longer in handcuffs and there was no guard in sight. The story is told that he paid authorities accompanying him $10,000 to walk free for 24 hours. During this time, some alleged that he was seen in the bathroom of room number 1, Louise Hathcock's private living quarters, breaking cold cream jars and recovering cash that they held. The next day, according to Bill McPeters, Towhead rode with the family in the McPeters limo to Louise's funeral in West Point, Mississippi. Hathcock family members said that Towhead was passing out tens of thousands of dollars in cash to selected members of the group to hold for him until he was released from prison. None of them would dare spend a cent for fear of what Towhead might do to them. Over the years, countless people have scoured the Shamrock properties in hopes of finding Louise's cash, but no one has ever reported having located it. So, if Towhead did recover all that cash, what eventually happened to all of it? Well, that's a few episodes from now.